I wanted to work you through something that we were talking about in our staff meeting yesterday, and this is just something that I did just to show our staff and our agents that when you're listening to all of this rhetoric and all these news stories about how the Canadian real estate market is crashing and everything's coming down and oh, the sky is falling, it's not true here. It isn't, not in Calgary. Now, there's other markets that, yes, it is true, and unfortunately, news media attaches themselves to those markets because they're the two biggest markets in the country and headlines sell. So that's the story. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you the comparison between Calgary and those markets since back in 2014. And the reason that I picked 2014 because that was the last peak of the Calgary market. This market peaked right around September, October of 14. That kind of carried through to the beginning of 15, and then it started to tail until the end of COVID, and then it has spiked since. So I'm just going to show you exactly what is happening in Calgary, and then we're going to add in Toronto and Vancouver. So this is back to 2014. So hang on one second as we get up to 14. Make sure this thing works. We're going to go right back to the beginning of 14. Okay, so now we're going to add in Calgary and hope that it works this time. Okay, here we go. So this is what Calgary has looked like since 2014. So if we go back to the very beginning of 2014, the benchmark price in Calgary was 418,000, and then today that benchmark price is 526. And this is the end of COVID right here, June 2020. Look at the spike we've seen in this market. Yes, it has turned over a little bit. May was our peak this year. March was a big month in other markets. May was our big month this year for pricing. Okay, it's tailed a little bit, but that's the market kind of shifting in the moment, but it's not drastic. That's just a small number. If we're going from 532 down to 526.9, that's not a lot of money. All right, I'm going to add in Greater Toronto, and let's just compare that to Calgary since 2014. So our graph looks an awful lot different. You're going to see how steady Calgary's market actually has been since the beginning of 14. So beginning of 14 in Greater Toronto, 512,000. Look at the spread here. Less than $100,000 spread between Calgary and Toronto back in 2014. And then Toronto just takes right off. So Toronto currently, 1.157 is the benchmark price. Okay, double what Calgary is. Over double what Calgary is right now. So we've gone from less than $100,000 spread in 14 to over double what Calgary is now. Their peak this year, 1,335. So you can see losing $200,000 in a matter of 4 months. That's a lot. That's a lot of money to lose in 4 months. Okay, so then now let's add in Greater Vancouver. We're going to throw this in here too. So back in 2014, Greater Vancouver was actually in a different spot. Greater Vancouver was actually higher than both markets, 673. Again, it followed sort of Toronto's trend line, but it didn't spike as hard as Toronto did this year. So Vancouver's peak this year, 1263 back in March. So both Toronto and Vancouver peaked in March. Calgary peaked in May. And then their benchmark price today, 1207. So they've lost not nearly as much as Toronto has, but Toronto has come off hard and will continue to do so. They crossed Vancouver. They became the most expensive market in the country back in October of 21. But just look at this. Look at this down here. So when you're hearing all these national news stories and they're talking about how the market has changed so much and it's crashing and everything is coming down, they're talking about this. They're not talking about Calgary down here. And look at the spread in here. So would you agree that these markets more than likely have more room to go down than Calgary does? And Calgary probably has more room to go up over time as we see a bit of an equalization in the country. Remember back in 2014, the spread was only this big. And these numbers have crossed over several times since they started recording this data. We can go back to 2005 and I can actually show you exactly what's happened in these markets since 2005 if you'd like. It's as far back as I can go. But back in 2006-07, Calgary was actually more expensive than Toronto. Okay, these markets here, when you're hearing bubble and overinflation, this is what national news stories are talking about. They are not talking about Calgary. Just something I wanted to show to you and just show you exactly where our market is. Yes, things have changed a little bit. Yes, interest rates are affecting our market, but Calgary is a great spot to be in. People are selling homes in these markets and trying to get out in droves, and we're the recipient of that. Calgary is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. We have, personally on our team, we've had piles of people moving here from the Lower Mainland and from Southern Ontario this year that are just cashing out and coming here and buying for cash. Long term, yes, we're going to see Calgary in a very, very good spot. Short term, we might have a little bit of short-term pain here. Price-wise, I don't think this market is going to take a beating, not like these two markets. So you got to take it with a grain of salt if you're listening to national news stories. It is not the same thing here.